Welcome to CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences.
Hello everyone, welcome to our roundtable on disinformation, miscommunication, and propaganda. Thank you once again to the speakers for your time, for being here today, and towards your commitment to youth and to participate in these types of roundtables. Before we begin, I want to give some type of background information about what CIVICA is, in case you're not familiarized with it. So CIVICA is an organization that connects the top leading universities in Europe. And as the name says, it promotes civic engagement and cross-collaboration. You can visit their website if you wish to know more opportunities. But one of the programs is called the Student Engagement Fund, in which you basically connect with other peer universities, send a project proposal, and if approved, you get to execute it. So that is how our project, Voices of CIVICA, is born. This is a collaboration between the Warsaw School of Economics in Poland, the Central European University in Austria, and then SNSPA in Romania, which they were in the first roundtable but couldn't make it in this roundtable, but they're still a very active part of our project since we also have podcast series, which they are doing as well. So Voices of CIVICA is a project on roundtables, podcasts. The first roundtable was about AI and the European Union and how we could connect these two. Now we're changing a little bit the topic, but still very interesting, fitting a lot with what is happening right now in the news and in modern days. I also want to take the chance to thank the IE Public Speaking Club. From the moment that we presented this program and the proposal to collaborate, they were immediately in. They wanted to participate, and definitely without their guidance and their mentorship, I don't think we could have been here. So thank you very much to Alex, the IE Public Speaking Club president, to Valeria, to Uma, to Philip. Thank you very much. I also want to express my gratitude to our staff today, the team who is helping us. We have Angel, he's also a master's student from IE, Khadija, Jimena, and thank you so much for being here and collaborating with CIVICA. And obviously, once again, my gratitude towards the speakers, Anna, Alana, Patrick, Mike. Thank you very much. My name is Camila. I am a first-year Bachelor in International Relations student here at IE, and I am from a country named Honduras. It is located in Central America. So yeah, without further ado, I want to present the speakers a little bit more. So we're gonna start with Anna, since she's closest to me. So Dr. Anna Maslon is an expert in strategic management and international business expansion, currently serving as Director's Plenipotentiary for Africa at the Warsaw School of Economics. She also holds a degree in international relations and completed her postgraduate studies in human resources management at the University of Warsaw. And she has extensive experience working with the EU, funding programs, and has held senior leadership roles. Thank you for being here, Anna. Now moving on, we have Professor Alana Moceri from IE University. She is an international relations professor, as well as a featured analyst at the World Politics Review, columnist at El Español, and a TV and radio commentator. Her work focuses on public diplomacy, global governance, activism, with a focus on the US, the EU, and Spain. And she's also a member of the World Economics Forum Expert Network, and known in Spain for founding and leading Democrats Abroad Spain from 2004 to 2009. Thank you, Alana. Patrick Walkowiak. He is a PhD candidate at Central European University with a professional background in mass media and parliamentary consultation. He is currently also a visiting doctoral researcher at Sciences Po Center for European Studies and Comparative Politics, where he continues to develop his research on media system and political communication in Europe, Right now, what he's researching is how changes in media ownership affect political coverage in Europe, and he's using machine learning methods to examine better these patterns. And his research definitely contributes to ongoing debates on media pluralism. And last, sorry, the applause, Patrick. Thank you. And last but not least, we have Mike Beatty. He's also a professor at IE University. He's an entrepreneur, lecturer in the technology and startup sector. He teaches computing science, where he's also active as a mentor for startups and new ventures. Mike is married with 3 grown children, and although he was born in the Isle of Man, he has lived in the UK for 12 years and in Madrid for 29 years. And he's a keen supporter of the European project, having met his wife at the Erasmus program. Mike is also CEO of Media Mano, which is a software company in the audiovisual space, and via la Cámara de Comercio in Madrid, he trains corporate clients on STEM technologies. Thank you, Mike, for being here. Okay, so now that we've presented all the speakers, we can move on to the official part of the roundtable. I will be the moderator for the first block, which is named The Architecture of Deception. So we're gonna be diving more into media, power, and narrative. To start our roundtable, I think it is important to take a step back because we see words like disinformation, misinformation, and propaganda, and we might think they're synonyms, they're very similar, but actually they have some key differences. Misinformation is false or inaccurate information that is shared without the intent of misleading. But disinformation is shared with the intent of misleading. And then propaganda goes a step further, and it's more of a systematic effort to shape perceptions and influence behavior. So, with that in mind, I would like to open the following question. To what extent do these distinctions matter politically? Do they change how we respond? Or does all false information have the same impact? It's an open discussion, so. And if you need a time to think, it's fine.
I think all of us as academics, we do believe that definitions matter. It's important to distinguish them, but often in what can be, I was going to call it as the cesspool of communication, right? Especially online communication, it starts to not matter so much in the end product. You know, what's misinformation, what's disinformation, what's propaganda. In the end, there's a lot of bad information out there. But really to study, to understand it, to do policy making, we do need to have these definitions.
Okay, anyone else that might want to share?
What?
Okay, we'll move on to the second question. Thank you, Alana. So now that we've clarified these concepts a little more, I want to talk more about how disinformation actually works in practice. So we often talk about disinformation as if it just exists. It only comes out there like from nowhere. But actually, no, disinformation is produced, it is distributed, and there is a whole process to it. So my question is, how is disinformation produced and distributed today? And why is it so effective? What makes people engage with it today?
If I may jump into that question. Well, I remember the moment when the war in Ukraine started. And because my relations with African countries is very vibrant, all my colleagues from African countries keep asking on WhatsApp, because that's the means of communication with African countries. Anna, please tell us what is happening there in Europe, because we are in the moment to have the problem with hunger. And in our newspapers is the titles that the European Union is not sending us the crops and the food, that was actually coming from Ukraine to Africa, especially to East Africa. So Russians' propaganda and how they actually, in just wink of seconds, it was just 2 weeks that they changed the narrative in Africa, who is actually responsible for the hunger in East Africa because of the war in Ukraine. And it wasn't like that the Putin was the influence, you know, that happened. No, it was European Union that we stopped our tanks, you know, that was about to send to East Africa. And that was just the wings of seconds, 2 weeks after the war has started. So it's a huge, on one hand, phenomena, but on the other hand, it's like the problem that we cannot control the way, and it's just a matter of money and access to technology, and nothing else. The truth doesn't matter in media nowadays.
Well, it depends though.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, and also that this kind of misinformation, whatever you want to call it, is co-produced. It's not just coming out of Russia or China, which are often the biggest state culprits, but we're all getting in on it. And as someone who works in the media, I say it's difficult because there's some media that's actively producing it, other media that's really trying hard to fact check their own work. I think when we fact check others' work, it doesn't usually work. But it's difficult because it's being produced by so many different actors. There's the state actors, but then there's so many non-state actors that are in the game. And it's funny because I've forgotten about that story. I remember it now. It was a really big story at the beginning. And so you know, it is always interesting to take stories like this and then see how they've traveled. Right? It's a great way to study this issue.
Especially one.
Sorry, go ahead.
You know, about this traveling of the news is like still, you know, Poland is, you know, the border with Ukraine, so we still have. So now we are in a process of a few 60 students from Latin America to come to our university, and all the, I would say, questions: is Poland safe? You have the war there. We are the NATO neighbor, so nothing really could happen. But still, this fear is still, you know, even if the war is, you know, the other country.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that there's also the matter of the distribution of such facts or alternative facts. So disinformation has always been part of humanity and human communication. Think about all of the myths and urban legends and so on and so forth. But what makes it such a big problem nowadays is that it can easily be spread through social media, intensified through the algorithms that boost interactions, that boost emotional content. So even though, yes, of course, the production, either of propaganda apparatuses like the one from the Russian state, from the Chinese state, and so on, that these are problematic. We also have to keep in mind, okay, where are these things shared? And these are platforms, usually US-American platforms, that dodge the responsibility to counteract the spread of misinformation and disinformation on their website. So they're usually saying, okay, what happens on our websites, we are not defining what the truth is and what is actually wrong. We are just giving our platform, and people are then to decide what actually the truth is and what is fake.
Europe has been much better than the US in that respect. Has gone further, maybe not far enough, but further than the US, and I notice it when I travel between Europe and the US.
Yeah, and it's framed as Europe overregulates, it's not dynamic and everything else.
In the US it is, yeah.
Yeah, and you think, okay, well, you know, that could be true, but it's what they call an interested argument in Spanish, right? It's an argument that has It's not designed to be helping us to find the truth. It's an argument that's very much oriented towards a deregulated, everything goes purely capitalist paradigm, which they have in the US much more than in Europe. To me, there's a really important factor associated with this, which is the legitimacy of the source. Okay, there is a criteria that I always now try to apply for myself, and is much more difficult to apply with the growth of social media, which is, who's the source of this information? Okay, to what extent are they legitimate, and how can I test their legitimacy as a source? It's much more difficult because you don't have credentials in social media, you just have followers, okay? So there's no kind of barometer or measure of to what extent they are. Within that, there are organizations who depend on their legitimacy to survive. And those are what I would call the serious media, okay? So serious media, and in the IE University here, we all get, as faculty and students, we all get access to the Financial Times and The Economist subscriptions. Which, when I discovered this, I was like a kid at Christmas, you know, thinking, oh my God.
These were expensive.
Because they're expensive. I was paying out of my own pocket the Economist subscription.
I paid for New York Times, yeah.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I'm about to save myself 450 euros this year because the IE is paying for my subscription. And I'm about to save myself a further £400 or euros because I was going to subscribe to the FT as well. And I will pay money out of my own pocket to get reliable, legitimate sources of information, because I think it's so important. I really do think it's so important, and doubly so as a professor here, right? Because people will look to us, just as they messaged you on WhatsApp to say, give me a reference here, to be informed. And the principal measure for me about legitimacy of the source is their capacity to, when you talked about check the sources, check the facts, the capacity to publish criticism of themselves. All right. So I read there's one in The Economist just very recently, where they did a report on the Mexican economy, and the part of the Mexican finance ministry responded in the letters, and it was a very scathing criticism of The Economist. Okay, it was a really critical article, and there it was, you know, just there for me to read and make my mind up. And that level of transparency and the acceptance of criticism and publishing of criticism, to me, significantly raises the credibility and legitimacy of the source. In the case of, let's say, social media influencers, social media outlets, it's always about identity in those cases. It's always about identity, and identity masquerading as fact. So perhaps there's another question for us to address at some point today, I hope we do, which is, how can you discern between fact and identity?
It's so hard. I have to say, as a journalist, right, what we're supposed to do is get a couple sources for everything we're asserting. And also, I have to say, as a journalist, when I write an article, particularly when I write for World Politics Review, man, does that go through the ringer. You should see the version that comes back from my editor, but I highly value and appreciate it, because he's questioning everything, and he's asking me to put a link behind whatever I said here, or explain something further. And I think that's the kind of media we want to be reading, and that's why I mostly stick with, FT, The Economist is wonderful, New York Times is wonderful, because these are rigorous organizations. They're not perfect. We do our best, but at least there's an effort to be checking everything we're doing. And it is true. And now there are also a lot of good journalists who have moved on to platforms like Substack, and started a lot of podcasts. But part of it is knowing who it is. And I know I wrote a column last year about this issue, and I said, you should know, because my column actually just says my name, which I have a problem with El Español for not putting more information. I think they should. And I said, and I even put in the middle of the column, Google me. And you'll see, because I have a website, I have all my information is very transparent. And I think if you can find that person and see who they are, see what they are on LinkedIn, you know, that's often what I'm doing when I'm reading an article is, well, who's written this? Who paid for this? right?
Yeah.
All of those questions we should be able to answer, and when we can't, something's wrong.
That's very great that you mentioned it. Who paid for the reports? You know, recently it was many information released, like from the organizations of the United Nations, that, for example, putting like more of in the food and industry. You know, the more few more 5 or 6 reports that were financed by the companies that were very interested into, you know, what the results in the report is. So sometimes, especially, you know, when we, with our expertise, we can judge to some extent the truth what we are reading. But truly honest, even recently, I was questioning myself, is that information that I'm reading is truth? What's the source of it? And with, you know, with the degree of, you know, the level of the professor, you know, and what's, you know, like my youngest son, he's 15 years old, he's a Generation Alpha. He's not questioning himself. Either the information from the social platform are real or not. So we always have the discussion. So that's the TikTok narrative that you are saying right now, or just another platform? Oh, stop, mommy, stop. But it's like, you know, the younger generation, they have absolutely problem, because we are, you know, with all these algorithms, AI, we are starting a question ourselves. Do it, you know, even when you read the reports of the international organizations, you perceive that it's, you know, credibility of its information. But then some journalists are releasing, you know, the information and
Cherry picking.
yeah, and then you have the problem. I mean, as a professor, to identify the real truth, you know.
Actually, if I add one anecdote, last year I had the good fortune to be invited on a journalism trip to Dakhla, Morocco, to see what they're doing with Western Sahara. Right? Touchy subject, difficult subject I've written a lot about, so I was very excited to go. We got to see the port that they're building down there. And then we had a conference, actually, of all the journalists who were there on disinformation, which was not all that interesting. But what was interesting to me was, and what I want to say, and this is a little damning about this conference, which was I assume it was paid for by the Moroccan government, but I'm actually not sure. The person who organized it is Moroccan and lives in Spain. And when we got back, he was really demanding articles from everybody. I mean, really coming after us, to the point where all of us journalists in a WhatsApp group decided we're not going to talk to him anymore. But that wasn't before everyone did write their article. And most of these were glowing articles about Dakhla as a destination. I'm sorry, it's not that much of a destination unless you're a windsurfer. But it was really odd, and I was shocked at what some of the journalists in the group did. And then by others, there was one with La Vanguardia here in Spain who did an excellent analysis, and I did a heavy-duty analysis for World Politics Review. Of course, it had to pass that muster, but you know, and so I had criticism as well as praise for what was going on down there. But what fascinated me was how easily so many journalists wrote puff pieces after getting a paid trip, and this is something that happens all the time in the media. And so yeah, it's a slippery slope, and it's, again, who paid for it, right?
If I just may underscore the points that you have risen earlier. So I've recently read a working paper on trust levels in traditional media in relationship to exposure to fake information. And what the authors found in the case of Die Zeit, a traditional German newspaper, is that the treatment group, those who were exposed to disinformation, actually had higher trust levels into traditional media, such as Die Zeit. So therefore, we can already see some kind of counter movement happening. People who are exposed to fake information on social media are slowly and steadily maybe coming back to the more trustworthy information that comes from the traditional or serious media sources, as you have framed this. Maybe this is a progress that will take a bit of time, as it's always happening, but also to leave you maybe on an optimistic note. A second aspect I wanted to mention is what you described already as this more or less decline of the journalism profession, and maybe a decline of the degree of professionalization. And I think this would be, I know we're not yet there at the discussion, but this might be one of the levers that we have to counteract these developments, trying to really increase the degree of professionalization in journalism. And on the other hand, I would also not put every outlet and every journalist into one pot, because there's also evidence, maybe you've read the Benkler book on network propaganda, that there's a certain separation within the media sector, where you have like right-wing and right extremist media that is sharing information, news on social media, because it's very emotional, because it has some fake information, it gets cheered up on social media, that then incentivizes politics to quote this information, which then again draws the attention to these far-right outlets. And this is not so much happening in the center and on the left of the political sphere, but this is more or less a development happening on the right wing exclusively. So we should also keep that in mind when talking about such issues. Yes.
Thank you very much. I gotta say, I love how the flow of the conversation is going. This is very much what we're looking for, an open discussion. So thank you. Thank you also for bringing personal examples. I feel that helps a lot to the viewers in YouTube and the audience to kind of understand what disinformation is, because it might be like a broad term, right? And I gotta say that as a young person and having social media, as you were saying, with not the rise of other types of media, not only traditional, it's very hard to decipher what is true and what is not, because you're being bombarded with more information, more now than ever. But now I want us to take a step back and look into the perspective between disinformation and democracy, because there is an ongoing debate about whether disinformation is something that weakens a democratic system, or whether it emerges as a result of something that already exists, an existing weakness. So I'd like to ask, do you see disinformation primarily as a cause of democratic decline or as a symptom of it?
I mean, there's always been disinformation.
Yeah.
It's not new. I think that was one of the first articles. I've written so much about it over the years, and I feel like I'm always repeating that. And it seems obvious, but I think it always bears repeating, because it's not new. It's always existed in different forms as we've had different technological advances in the media. Back when it was just, I mean, original newspapers were political party, leaflets, really. And so originally it was, different sides of the story. But that said, we know we don't really have democracy if we don't have good information, and so that's the thing. But I think it's always important to remember that. And so I don't know if it's symptom or a cause, or we do see a lot of democratic decline around the world, but certainly I don't know if we can say that disinformation is causing that. It's certainly a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, if I may give maybe a different perspective on that question. Usually you end such discussions with an optimistic note, but let me put it now, put it out there now. So what I always ask myself when talking about this information is it a normatively bad thing? Is it just harmful for society, or is there not maybe also a positive aspect of disinformation? And why am I saying that? In this regard, I would like to refer to like the arguments that John Stuart Mill made on the freedom of expression, and he's basically stating that false information or information that does not contain the truth is necessary to actually construct the truth, because only by debunking what is false information, what's basically wrong, we can construct what he says is the truth. Of course, we can have a whole discussion on what actually is truth and so on. Maybe we'll talk about it later a bit more. But what I'm trying to say is that false information also includes the chance to prove the truth at any point. We maybe just need to adjust our instruments of proving the truth in that sense.
I think to separate it into a cause or an effect, you can think of circumstances when it's both. And for me, it would be much more of a kind of, rather than a cause and effect model, it'd be much more of a relationship model where one affects the other and the other affects it. Disinformation can definitely perjure the democratic process, and as a result of that, it can create disinformation as well. Okay, but I would say that there is something that I think is particularly relevant to the audience on this particular point, and I was hoping it would come up because it was a point I was hoping would come up today, and it is that in the world of disinformation, where you can pretty confidently say that the information you're hearing is wrong, and maybe deliberately wrong, the action of correcting it is never really successfully achieved by trying to point out that it's wrong. It simply polarizes people, and especially in the identity world, and just makes them entrench themselves in the identification with that disinformation. In the process of trying to bring it to a more debatable plane, and a plane where people apply a little bit of cognitive action and make a decision themselves, you absolutely have to put a foot into the "it could be true" camp. You have to be able, I think, to put a foot into, no matter how outrageous it can seem. Pizzagate is a good example of that. For those of you who know about Pizzagate, which is that there's a pizza parlor in Washington where the Democrats organize these pedophile parties where they murder children and then eat pizza. And there was a massive group of people going around there to take retribution, like a lynch mob, because people believed it, right? So the reaction to that says it's obviously nonsense, it's obviously disinformation, for some people wouldn't alter their perception that it's true. What can alter their perception that it's true is for you to say, well, it might be. Yeah, it could be that there is a pizza parlor that collects children and abuses them, and then everybody eats pizza afterwards. It could be true. So let's just think it through. And as you think it through, the ridiculousness of the argument becomes absolutely clear. And it's to your point that says, well, make it public. Everything can be said, and then just subject it to some proper analysis. But the analysis, for me, always has to have the possibility that it's true, the foot in the camp of the other party.
I think, and that reminds me of another story that I like to cite, because what we see with a lot of this kind of disinformation is the in-group pull of it, that you're sharing it because that's what your friends and your group does, your tribe, this identity part, and this building a sense of belonging. And so I like to cite another one that was what Democrats were sharing a lot, because we usually pick on the right in the U.S., but ahead of the 2016 election, there was a meme going around that I bet many of you have seen. It says that Trump spoke to People magazine in 1988 or something, and he said that if he ever ran for president, he'd run as a Republican because they were so stupid. And it's like, it's really funny, right? I, of course, was seeing it everywhere, and I thought, I wonder if this really is true. And there's a website called Snopes. That's a great one for looking at memes like this. And absolutely not true. Never happened. Conversation never happened. But people were sharing it. At one point, I was getting after friends on Facebook. This was 2016, and saying this isn't true. It didn't matter because people want to share things that they find are funny with their in-group, and so that's and you can't discount enough how powerful that lure is, and that sense of belonging to a group is a big part of why people share stuff even when they know it's not true. You know, so actually giving some, you know, helping them, like giving them an out for that. Okay, this is ridiculous. No, but maybe it could be true. Is one way to really start to have discussions with people, because what's happening a lot of times is we're so siloed in either the media, the social media, only with the people who agree with us, that's another big part of the danger of all of this disinformation. Is I go home and I have conversations with my Republican brother, and it's like, where are you hearing this? We're reading totally different media. And what we need to be doing is connecting and having some shared truth, but we're not these days. And so actually saying, okay, tell me more about that is a great way to start these conversations with the people who are telling you things that might be making your head explode.
Thank you very much. I gotta say, I hadn't thought about that point of misinformation being a way or sort of a bridge to prove what is real and what is not. So I think that's really interesting to say. Now I want to talk more about geopolitics, focusing on Europe. And obviously disinformation is a global phenomenon, but it is not perceived or seen the same way in all regions, right? Because there is historical context, there are external influences, etc., that all play a role. So my question is, how do you believe that disinformation is experienced in different regions of Europe, specifically Central, Eastern, and Western European countries? Is the threat from Moscow, for example, perceived the same here in Madrid than it is in Warsaw?
I would say to some extent, yes. I was born in that moment that Poland was under Soviet Union domination, and I still remember when watching the movies in the cinema. Before the movie has started, we were seeing, you know, these propagandas movies made by people from Warsaw under Moscow domination. And still, in our politics narrative, we are in newspapers, we have a lot of kind of which politician is under influence of Russia, who was working for them, that we have still spies, you know, Russian spies in our parliament, who is so that's, you know, kind of information that is spreading around. And as you said before, that it's absolutely polarizing our society. So no one is right now believing, you know, that in the context that we have the war just at our border, we have, of course, lots of migrants, well, refugees, you know, from Ukraine, and that's also polarization of the information. That Poland is contributing a lot into that help for Ukrainian people in our country. No one, of course, we as university, we calculated how much money they bring into our GDP by working. More than 1 million people are working in the system. So more the contributing that our spending as a social spending is. But of course that piece of information is not spreading around the, you know, social media. Okay, it's like rather than they are taking, you know,
facts.
Yeah. So it's like, as you said, it's like this misinformation is not like the cause of demolishing the democracy. It's part. It's just this one puzzle that it's, you know, to much extent very important right now, because the people don't want to dive into the merits of the information. what they read in the headlines of the newspaper, Ukrainians are taking our jobs, Ukrainians are taking our social, system, but it's not the truth. But they want to have, perceive it as the truth. That's it,
It's a narrative.
Yeah. Right now, of course, when this threat of and what Mr. Trump is doing, and that Europe is not safe, we do not have this military system, in the that we could really, if something happened with, geopolitics and Mr. Putin, another idiot will start doing what he's doing. Sorry to say that, but we in Poland, we really know this Russian's propaganda. I feel it, in my body, so, and as many of us. So, but still the Western narrative is like, we are safe, but we are not safe from this historical point of view and this context. When what you've mentioned in our history of our country is like Second World War. All the alliances, the Brits, France, they promise us that we will not be divided into. And what happened after Second World War? We were under Soviet Union for 50 years. Betrayed, it's still very, so we know how, and especially within the geopolitics, we have to be very, I would say, sensitive in the way that we put in information, because it totally can destroy the whole system that we were building. Of course, the question is, either this geopolitical system was okay, if not, like with Iran, with Israel, with all this shifting, like, of course, that's the open question. But we, as humans, we didn't develop anything better than democracy yet.
Do you think that people in Poland, Eastern Europe, because many of you have even experienced very firsthand Russian propaganda, that you're more maybe savvy with it, at identifying it, seeing it?
Well, I think yes, especially those who remember. I mean, so my generation, I was a kid, but still, that's transformed everything, what I'm, how I perceiving Russia. I mean, the way, of course, I'm, Russian culture, like the literature, that's totally different. But I'm just saying about, this political intensive way, how they actually are trying to rebuild great Russia right now. And that's what Putin is trying to do.
Yeah.
There's an interesting, exactly to your question, Camila, there's an interesting contrast between the defence spending in Madrid and the defence, in Spain, and the defence spending in Poland. When Trump asked people to meet their commitment to NATO and in fact increase it, really you should meet the commitments that you commit to, right? Objectively, if you're part of an alliance that says you're going to put 3% of your GDP into defence, then you should put 3% of your GDP into defence. Objectively, I think that's a fair expectation. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Poland is like 4.5 to 5, something around there currently.
The highest in Europe.
The highest, yeah.
So somebody's feeling the heat there, right? And in Spain, they said, oh, okay, well, if we just reclassify road building as defence, then we'll push it up to, 2. And,
1.3 now.
Yeah,
It's at 1.3, yeah.
Yeah, 1.3.
It was at 1 and now it's,
1.3. So, and a bit of, moving categories makes it look higher. I mean, not meeting the commitment. Politically, at home, you can see how that happens, because there's not a great sense of threat from Russia in Spain. nothing like in Poland, I imagine. So politically, it is harder to get people to get excited about defence spending when it's a long way away and there's plenty of countries between us and them, and so on and so forth. But I would say that the number, the hard number, in terms of commitment to defence spending, is a pretty good indicator as to the extent to which people perceive the threat as different.
Actually, speaking of defense, just the other day, someone who works in the Spanish government was telling me about a story that I hadn't heard yet because I'm not always following the Spanish press, but this was interesting to me because they said that there's fear that because Trump is unhappy with Spain, that they want to move the big military base in Rota to Morocco. And I was like, wow, but that's huge. That would be, and Morocco's been a better buddy to Trump and all that. But so I went looking because this is a story, and I thought, oh, maybe I have a article for World Politics Review. Well, no, there's nothing of the sort going on. The question is about building a drone, some sort of drone base, some sort of place to launch drones in Morocco. But certainly there's no intention to move Rota anywhere. Yet apparently in the Spanish media that's a theme that's been coming about. So yeah.
Yeah, to also maybe add up on these perspectives that we have heard so far. I'm not Austrian, but trying to take the Austrian perspective. Austria is a state that is not part of NATO. Austria is also a state that for historical reasons decided to be neutral and has it actually in its constitution that it cannot join a military alliance. So I think what is considered to be a threat is very different. Of course, you could say, okay, this small country in the middle of the Alps, why should they care for defense? But here, what you framed as threat from Moscow is more perceived as a threat on liberal democracy by, for example, supporting the right wing either financially or by the propaganda apparatus. So even beyond the space of pure security, there is a threat for our democracy. So another aspect is that also the pure geography matters. If you're right at the border to Russia, if you experience the consequences of the war firsthand, because you have a lot of refugees, because you have a border with Belarus that is under constant attacks, where you have also in other countries such as Lithuania, other Baltic countries, Russian minorities, the threat obviously is experienced differently. And maybe the last point, what differs between these countries is also the media system and how it developed. Where, for example, in Germany and in Austria, people really have learned the lesson from fascism and that media can be used as a propaganda tool, therefore try to construct it and design it in a way that it cannot be captured by authoritarian parties anymore, by either decentralizing the media system, but also have a dual system of state and public service and private media. And I think these developments that have taken a lot of time and also cost a lot of money to maintain are maybe different in countries such as Spain, where the Franco dictatorship ended in a different way than the dictatorships ended in Germany and Austria, and also in Poland, where the authoritarian government also ended up in a different way than it happened in Germany and Austria. So we have also different paths that were taken, which also influences how the disinformation coming from Russia and the propaganda is perceived and maybe also processed within the country.
Thank you very much. This is it from me from the first block, but I think it was very interesting and it kind of set the tone for how this discussion will go. Thank you again for your time, and now Khadija will be our moderator for block 2. So thank you.
I'm Khadija Lahmer, and I'm going to do the second part, which is about digital amplifiers, how technology has industrialized deception and what Europe is doing about it. So my first question would be, has generative AI changed the disinformation landscape? Are deepfakes, synthetic voices, AI-generated news an important shift or a new version of old tactics?
I'd say what we see with every new version of media, of communication, is we're seeing old tactics, old strategies used in new ways, right? And so I think it's interesting because when social media became really popular, that was when I started getting asked to write and talk about disinformation. And I was like, well, it's not new. But again, I know I always go back to that. But what it did was it kind of put it all on steroids, you know. AI, I'm not quite as sure. I'd say we have to defer to our AI expert. But certainly what we're seeing is there's just so much more of it. And as a political communication specialist, I mean, when I originally took my first political communication class at UCLA back in the late 1980s, right? It was pretty easy to study this stuff. It was, you could say, okay, in the US there were 3 major television networks. There was like a few major, we had the LA Times in Los Angeles, and you could really kind of wrap your head around it. And now we have such a diverse media system. And yeah, to your point, Patrick, different media systems in different countries that we have some good studies on, that it just becomes such a deeply complex issue. And with AI, I'm not even sure where to start sometimes.
There's an incredibly good book written by a guy called Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast and Slow that some of you will know. If you don't know it, I recommend that you get to know it. And if you don't read it in its entirety, you can perhaps ask your favorite LLM to give you a summary of it. But basically one of the, what he's talking about how the mind works, okay? And how it's basically split into 2 parts, system 1 and system 2. And system 1 is what we've perhaps traditionally called our emotional brain, and system 2 is our rational brain. And he has plenty of examples of which of the 2 brains you engage at any moment in time for a particular thought requirement. And one of the conclusions he comes to, which I think is incredibly interesting, is that we use system 1 all the time. You know, we really do. We don't think rationally. We don't engage our calculating, logically analytical brain in order to come to conclusions. We use it extremely rarely because it's hard, right? It takes up a lot of energy and it's uncomfortable, and we don't like to use it. We like to use our gut reaction, our instant solution mind in order to do things. And somebody once talked about AI as being a technological implementation of system 1. The gut reaction, the instant no analysis. This is what it looks like because this is my immediate reaction. And in many ways, it's, to me, a great analogy because AI doesn't have a system 2. It just doesn't have it. It doesn't have the ability to actually logically, cognitively think through something. It's just going to give you the statistically best result. And to the point about AI influencing things, it's not an LLM answer for me. It's basically a statistical answer. And I'm going to use Brexit as the platform to illustrate it. Because when Brexit was happening, as Camila said in the introduction, I'm a bit of a fan of Europe. It's helped me to build my family and my career, of course. And when Brexit was taking place, I was extremely uncomfortable. Extremely uncomfortable. It was proving to be an extremely disagreeable time of my life, right? And part of the reason was the level of disinformation. That was clearly disinformation, okay? and the extent to which that was being politicised. There's much more detail I can go into, but I won't, about what was happening in Brexit. But what I will say is that I was becoming very, very, very polarised, finding it very difficult to find respect and even communication points with people who are pro-Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
There was something wrong with them, right? This is my thinking. There was actually, and this was identity and belonging,
Yes.
you know, in the extreme. And I thought, no, Mike, there's nothing wrong with somebody who has a different political opinion than you. It's just they're looking at something differently, right? And I realised that what was happening was, as I was going through YouTube, I was getting clearer and clearer arguments as to why these other people, these pro-Brexiteers, were not just wrong, they were actual nutcases. They were mentally ill. You know, they were a danger to our children, and our children's children, and our children's children's children, you know? And they were like a risk. And I was thinking, no, this is going too far. So what I started doing was I started reading the propaganda from Brexit. You know, I started following the channels and clicking on the videos in YouTube that said Brexit's a great thing. And what happened? Well, it got even worse. I was like, oh, these people who, you know, don't want Brexit, they're just nutcases. Brexit's such a good thing. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm losing my mind. You know, I've gone from one extreme to the absolute other extreme, and I think I'm right. What's going on? And by doing that, by just saying, right, I'm going to jump into the camp, I realised that what YouTube was doing was it was constantly giving me more and more simplified and therefore extreme examples of the thinking that leads you to arrive at a specific conclusion. But nobody in Google was thinking about that. That was an algorithm, and it was an AI algorithm. It's a simple AI. You can go through the statistical textbooks and it'll show you how it's done. It just takes the factors that are in something and it measures how much time you're there and, you know, what you look at afterwards and what you don't look at afterwards, and it just synthesizes it into simple factors, and then it'll give you the videos that are stronger on those less complicated and more extreme cases. I was the victim of AI, thinking that I'm this wonderful, rational human being. No, I wasn't. I was just the victim of AI. And that was really the thing that helped me to reconcile myself to the fact that I think that the stuff I consume that's consistent with what I believe is true. And the stuff I consume that is not consistent with what I believe is a lie. And when I realized that, I thought, nope, you're being duped. Just like the rest of them, Mike, you're being duped.
That's the same experiment that a Wall Street journalist, say Julia Angwin, did, and she was saying that that's exactly it with YouTube. They just feed you more and more extreme versions of these videos, and it's the algorithms are such an important piece of this, and at least in the EU, they've started, you know, looking for some transparency, because I've often said whenever I'm in discussions with people about propaganda and disinformation, it gets to this: we need more education, we need more media literacy, and that's always a good thing. But what we need is to get after, I mean, what's put all of this on steroids is the fact that we get onto YouTube or the other social media, and we're being fed more and more extreme views, and those algorithms are not always transparent. We don't always have, so I think now under EU regulation, we need to have a way to opt out of the algorithms. I was trying to do that the other day. I couldn't figure it out. So, and I'm usually pretty good with social media. I couldn't figure it out, but I think, you know, we should be able to set our feeds to something that isn't algorithm based. I do remember Twitter when it was a fun place, and you'd hop on, this is 2008, you'd hop on and you'd actually read your feed that what had come to that point. Now I've quit it just because or X is a terrible place. Actually, I my best advice is to stay off the social media in general. It's just not a good place to get news. Use it for cat videos. It's the only good thing about the social media. Otherwise, if you want serious news, go to the serious news sites. But yeah, these algorithms are such an important part of it.
Yeah. If I may jump into that very quickly. You mentioned about education, but the only part of education that I'm really saying that is absolutely right now crucial is like to teach the younger generation that algorithms matters because you were trapped, I was trapped, but we have, as a rational humans, we knew that we were trapped. Those people, I mean, this Generation Alpha, they don't have a clue that they were duped by. And the best thing what happened to me as a mom was my son saying last week, "Mommy, now I know what you were saying to me about this algorithm on YouTube."
Oh.
And I was like, really? Yes. But that was constantly, every single day, trying to explain, how they are actually working and, explaining what is algorithm to,
And it does the agenda setting.
Exactly.
That's the thing. So the old agenda setting that we've always looked at, but
Look-
it's the algorithms doing it.
Look how was it when the ChatGPT for the first release was, when you were asking, please show me the black woman or businesswoman. The pick was, the monkey, because those who were feeding ChatGPT, it was like
White men.
Exactly. The
Made
white,
it in
so
their own-
Worst kind white men.
Those
they
white
really
men.
are.
so so that's of course huge, deep, and that's the threat that I'm seeing, like the most important right now, like the deep fakes. That's what I was saying at the beginning of our discussion, that even professors are questioning, is it really what I'm seeing?
So much.
Yeah.
As somebody who has lived in Britain during Brexit, quit social media, at least most of it, a couple of years ago, and is a white man, I also would like to elaborate a bit on the training of these large language models that you have just touched upon. So I think what we need to keep in mind is that if we use these models to receive some information, they're using data that already exists outside. So that can be like on the internet. They're usually trained on data on the internet. Can be some racist forum, and then you will have results such like that. But it can also be news articles, very reliable sources, and so on and so forth. But every time we use it to obtain some information about a topic that interests us, we do not do the search ourselves, and we do not click on the website. So in the effect, the outlet and in the end the journalist does not receive the money that they deserve for doing their work. So I don't know how many of you use LLMs nowadays as a substitute for Google or for doing the research yourself, and how many of you actually click on the sources that ChatGPT gives you. But when you're not doing it, you're taking away the economic base of what journalists do. Therefore, those people, those serious media, those who actually do the work, they are very professional, usually do the triangulation, test if an information is credible or not, they will receive less and less money. We will have less and less journalists if we do not stop going on these LLMs and starting to do the research ourselves again.
Just
It's
one
important.
very
Journalism matters.
No.
one very quick point about that is many of you will notice now that when you go on a search engine, the first answer it gives you is actually AI
Is the
generated,
AI,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah,
which is very, in my opinion, very significant.
Well, and it gets it. I know if I'm, and of course I use these models to help me when I'm writing an article, but it's kind of like sometimes I've told students you might find some interesting data in an article, but then click through to the original data. Go look at it. Look through it yourself. See it with your own eyes. See who actually did it. And I do the same thing with these articles. I might ask ChatGPT, I'll typically use the IE one, and I might ask it for some source, but I'm like, give me the sources because I want to go through and then check it myself. If I'm going to put my own reputation on the line, I feel like that's the least I need to do. But I mean, it's still super helpful for finding sources. But you have to see it that way. It's like an assistant that's going to gather. If you might say in the past when people had assistants, you might say, hey, go get me all the sources that are going to be useful to help me write this article, and that's the same thing. But you still have to read them and look through them.
Sure.
Right?
Thank you for all your answers. The question was about AI, and of course you all made the link with algorithms. So the second questions would be, do recommendation algorithms have a democratic responsibility? Should platforms be legally liable for the narratives they amplify?
I say yes. And as someone who's from Silicon Valley, I'm very happy that the EU is taking this kind of regulation seriously. I think it's very important. I support it. We need to know what these algorithms are doing and doing to us, and that's the only way. I mean, again, education can do so much. And what Mike was saying, I mean, we also have other researchers that show how emotional our decisions are. Jonathan Haidt's work also gets at that same exact thing, and he describes it as this elephant with a little rider on top, and we'll make our decisions like the elephant kind of goes one way or another, and that's our gut instinct, and then the rider on top rationalizes it afterwards. And so we're very, very susceptible to this stuff, and so we need to know what we're being fed. My answer as an individual is that pretty much get off the social media. I do pay someone to help me with it, and post stuff, so I'm spending less. I spend as little a time as possible on the social media because I feel like it makes me dumber when I look at it, and there's so much good stuff to read, and I've even been going back to reading paper books just because I feel like we all kind of need a detox from this stuff. Yeah, from the screens too.
Yeah, to maybe have a different perspectives and go a step back. So I think it depends how we assess the information and that received by algorithms, and what is media, what is the news information that we receive for algorithms. It is a commodity on one hand because it serves to generate some data points, and then the social media companies can sell these data points then to advertising companies. But it also is democratic good, and we need the information to base our political decision, to vote, to debate also. So we're between the two worlds of markets and democracy in a sense. There are authors, for example, Napoli, framing it as a public good, but also saying that it can have, the information can have positive and negative externalities. And negative externalities in a sense that this is used as a commodity but has negative consequences for the society, as it destroys trust into one another, as it impedes the construction of a compromise, and so on and so forth. So therefore, as we are doing it with environmentally harmful productions, as we are doing it with commodity affecting our health or mental health, cigarettes, alcohol, pornography, whatever, it is actually the role of the state to restrict it or to form it in a way that society can perform better with it, including age restrictions, include what happened, for example, in Australia. I think in the UK it's also a debate, or
in Spain here.
In Spain, in Spain,
the
yeah.
regulation.
So apart from just prohibiting it or just leaving it as it is laissez-faire, we can also restrict it somehow. Yeah.
cigarettes make a great comparison. We know in the early years, back, I don't know, 50s and 60s, the cigarette manufacturers knew that it caused cancer, that it was very dangerous for people's health, yet they fought and fought. Of course they fought against regulation. The same thing's happening. My best friend was an Apple engineer in the early days. She was so hard on her daughters with their social media use because she knew exactly what it is, a highly addictive thing. You know, I mean, I've even seen some of you today picking up your phones. It's addictive. It's hard. I have a constant battle with my students. I've asked IE, I want us to put phone boxes into these. We have all this high tech in here. Can't we just put a simple wooden phone box? So, because my students, I get it, right? It's hard to not pull out your phone when it's right there and see what's going on. It's a window to the world, but the algorithms are what make it so addictive. And it's like a drug. I mean, I find that if I do say, oh, okay, let's look at Instagram and see a few cat videos or fashion stuff before I go to bed, and then the next thing I know, an hour has gone by.
Exactly, yeah.
It's terrifying. And so, of course, we need to look at ways to keep kids off. And I think, like, right now, our students in the classroom right now have never had any breaks put on their use of the social media that's feeding them with all these algorithms. And so I feel bad for them. It's also shot most of our attention spans to hell. That's why I've been back to reading books on paper and just getting, and it's hard, right? We've all suffered from it, but I think that the younger generation is particularly because I mean, when we were, maybe you some, we just had, they were saying that the TV was rotting our brains, and that was what was so horrible.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we definitely know they're dangerous.
Just onto your question, Khadija, I think there's for me, I would take a step back if possible and say we should try to frame the legislation, the legal response to algorithms using criteria that are not specific to digital media and algorithms. So in other words, if we have some kind of drugs are a good example, okay? If we have drugs and we legislate against the use of drugs because they're harmful to society, and doctors will tell us that they're harmful to us, they cause addiction, they cause us to lose our agency, then okay, yeah, we should legislate against that. With social media, if we can show that happens, and I think we can now, then we can use that legislation in the same way. We can say, because it's harmful to people, because it creates addiction, because it takes away agency from citizens, then we should legislate against it and make it so that it can't be done, and it's illegal to do it. That translated into, we're going to regulate how the digital platform works, I think that's a minefield. I think that's going to be really difficult to legislate against. But more generic legislation, like what they recently had in, I believe it was in California, where they had a ruling against Meta and against Google for YouTube, because of the harm it caused to young people. Many people have seen that as the first step towards the ability to rein in some of the freedom. And as I recall, that was done against more generic health legislation about the harm it was causing to children, right? So I do see more success through that route than trying to individually, specifically regulate how the platforms work.
Well, and it says a lot that Silicon Valley, I'm from San Carlos, which is in the middle of that, is filled with very expensive private schools that tout themselves as being screen-free. It says a lot.
Thank you. We talked about regulation.
Just for a minute, because our camera is overheating. So what we will do is we will have the lunch catering, and then we will resume with Khadija's questions, and then the block 3, if that's okay, just so the camera can refresh.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Call down the facilities and ask them to turn on the air conditioning.
Yeah. We will. We just have
Or
to
I
wait for a
can.
few minutes, but the
Alright.
catering is available.
Oh, okay. Well, I could use some water.
You need water if you're going to sit for an hour or so doing this stuff. Note for next time. They need to get us little tables or something. Or just take the regular.
So we were stopped when we were talking about regulations, algorithms, and if platforms should be legally liable for the narratives they they amplify. So now we are going to talk about the geopolitical asymmetry, because Europe regulates, the United States innovates, and China deploys. So does Europe's ethical approach to AI create a structural disadvantage in the information war?
A disadvantage for Europe?
Yes.
I don't think, I think it's important to defend citizens. So I'm a proud EU citizen in that respect. American EU. I think it's the right thing to do. We need to find ways to protect people, protect democracy. And so some of these steps, they feel like they haven't been all that much, especially all this sort of opt-in to the web pages. We're all like, we all just sort of give our consent. But we do need to think about it. We do know this is dangerous for young people and for everybody. We know it's highly, highly addictive. But I mean, when I go home to the U.S., one of the things I get struck sometimes by, so you don't get asked every web page if you consent. That might be a little easier. But also what I notice is when I'm home, the amount of, I mean, and this is on the phone, but still the amount of random phone calls my friends get. I mean, it's constant. Your phone is constantly ringing with fake whatever recordings on the other end, and none of that is at all regulated in the U.S., whereas here at least we have some protections, which I greatly, greatly appreciate.
I think in America, they sell the notion of democracy in a different way to how it's sold here. In America, they, to use, I think, the technical term, conflate, so they confuse and falsely join the notion of low regulation, so very, very, very small regulation, with freedom and democracy.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I think for the standard, if there is such a thing as standard American person, they feel that they live in a very free country, in a free democracy, right? When you actually look at the criteria with which you might measure how democratic something is, and how much liberty people really do have, I think you'd be quite surprised about how little liberty people can have in the United States compared with in Europe. And I think fundamentally that's based on economics. I think it's fundamental that in America, basically, if you've got money, everything's fine. And if you haven't got money, well, it's because you're lazy and you don't want it and you're not prepared to make a contribution. And that paradigm, which is extended obviously with Trump with his big beautiful bill, which restricts access to healthcare for significant numbers of people, and subsidies for significant numbers of people in return for lower taxes for people who already have money. In Europe, we just don't have that paradigm. Okay, we just don't have it. And in the short term, it can look like we are really falling behind, because I got the meme, I'm sure many of you got the meme, where he said, this is how America does it, and we saw how Elon Musk's rocket re-landed, in a launch bay. And it's quite striking visually to see a rocket coming back down to Earth and landing, right? And then it said, and this is what we do in the EU, and they had this bottles with the tops that don't fall off.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a funny meme, okay? It really was a funny meme, and it made you think, oh yeah, we're just pathetic compared to the Americans. I really don't think that in the past few years that paradigm is still playing out. I think a lot of people are saying, hang on a minute, America is going absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
It's absolutely losing its mind with this presidency. And Europe is saying, we need to up our defense game, and Europe is saying, oh, well, maybe we've lost the plot a little bit on AI, we're a little bit further behind on AI. I don't think we are, personally. I don't think we are behind on AI. We have Mistral, which is a European first division AI company, built by people who left OpenAI in the early days. We have Anthropic, which, although they are American, they're prepared to stick their feet in and say, we're not going to produce the models that literally can bomb a girls' school in a country and think it's doing the right thing. We're not going to take part in that. We just don't want to. And, suffering the wrath of the presidency as a result. And we also have, which was quite controversial, a president here in Spain, or a prime minister who's a European leader, who said, "You're not going to take off from our bases on our territory to bomb Iran," which caused consternation with a large group of people in Spain.
Oh, yeah.
And for others, it was almost a thing of national pride and identity. Well, we don't just have to bend over for Trump. If we don't agree with something he's doing, we can actually say no. And I think there was some kind of ripple effect from that. Other European countries have gone to the point where they say, not even our airspace, never mind your bases, not even our airspace to do a bombing. Now, America has said, "Oh, it doesn't matter, we don't need you." But I like that, and I think you can do that in Europe. You can do that if you've got an independent democracy that doesn't necessarily always bend its knee to power, especially power from other nations.
Well, and the NSS, the National Security Strategy that came out, when was it, December, that got lots of notice, was actually, threatening interference into European elections. It made that very, very clear. But also one of the things, and it was when I was starting to write, I thought maybe I'd write a several piece part column about it, and I only got one part out. but one of the ones that struck me also in that document was that the U.S. was coming after Europe at some point for tech regulation. Was seeing it as very anti-American and a threat to one of our biggest industries. And so I would say, keep an eye out for that. Trump's always picking whatever issue seems to take his fancy at any point and starts a fight over it. So I wouldn't be surprised. I know he was yelling the other day again about Greenland. So sooner or later, he's going to start yelling again about tech regulation in Europe, and will make some threats, and everybody will get nervous. But it's that. I think I got calls from Australian and British press over Sanchez's defiance of Trump, and a lot of the world was really applauding it. I think he made a good move, particularly internationally. There was a lot of consternation in Spain, but in the end it really worked in his favor, and I think people want to see that. But in the tech world, I think it's coming. That'll be a fight that will happen over, well, we'll see. I'm done with predictions.
There's a very interesting, for those of you who are in the IE, there's a very interesting interview with Zani Minton-Beddoes, who's the editor of The Economist, and Christine Lagarde. A very, very interesting interview. I really would recommend, if you've got access to The Economist, that you read watch the interview. It's really good, really good. And it gives you the perspective of somebody who's a true European about the status of Europe, right, in the world. Because there is, what they call Europe bashing. There's an awful lot of Europe bashing going on, and it's not particularly accurate perspective.
But I would like to see, as an American here I've been here 27 years, and has finally become a citizen a year ago. I would like to see EU leaders do more of what Sanchez did. And I'm not always the biggest rah-rah Sanchez person, but it was like, we need more of that. And that's the only language that Trump understands. Is someone who says, okay, well, I'm going to hit you back harder. It's the only language, and that's not the kind of international relations I want to see. I'm very much into the vein of soft power, of attraction, and how we can find ways to get along, and some of the things that, and Mark Carney, who talked about, ways that we can find different types of alliances over different issues, and that might be where the world order goes. But this is all. A lot of this is going to continue to be underpinned and strengthened or weakened by technology and by our ability to communicate. In the break, we were talking about whether there can be a global public sphere, something that a lot of researchers work on, something that I've worked on. It's hard, but actually we are at a point where we can have. I mean, certainly the New York Times publishes a lot of its articles both in Chinese and Spanish. You see, we can do that in real time now, have things instantly published. So maybe, I mean, in a sense there's a lot of overlapping news organizations, but do we all have a similar story at a similar time is a tougher one, and actually a public sphere where we can come together and actually deliberate over issues. You know, it seemed like that. I always say in 2008, I was running the Obama campaign here, and I got invited to a lot of techie kind of conferences. It was really weird, and people were calling me a social media expert, which was really weird too, because I was an early adopter, but I was just running the Obama campaign here, and everybody was like, wow, he has a Facebook page. And I would go to these conferences, and what struck me was with these young guys who were like evangelizing about social media, and that it was going to solve all the problems of the world and make the world more democratic. And I mean, it's funny now. At the time, I found it a little perplexing, because like, wow, they're so sure of themselves. You know, and I wasn't ever convinced, even though I had hopes. And so, but you know, we're more divided into these little silos of like-minded thinking than ever, which is what contributes to the polarization, or at least the perceived polarization. You know, and some interesting research that I more listened about a few years ago that struck me was that maybe we're always talking about polarization, and oh, we're so polarized. But here's the thing, it's really about 10% on either side is super extreme, and the other 80% of people are more in the middle. And the thing is, though, the extremists are making a lot of noise on social media, which then the traditional media picks up and amplifies. And that's what we see, because it's the most interesting. And of course, even when you're at a good newspaper like the New York Times, you still need to grab eyeballs. And so it's a lot more interesting to put the crazies up there than it is to talk about people in the sensible center, you know. And so this all just feeds on itself.
It's interesting as well that whenever I see anybody at a Trump rally, they're always nutcases. And I've never been to a Trump rally.
The camera goes right to the nutcases.
The camera homes in the nutcases, and I thought to myself, Mike, check yourself, right? The camera is going for the nutcases, isn't it? The like 85-year-old women who are dressed like they're 18 with the big American hats and bikinis, you know. And you just think, this woman, she's not right. There's something not right with her. And she's going, I don't care what Donald Trump does, he's my man. And you think, oh my God, Trump supporters. No, Mike, one person is not representing millions. Okay?
I wrote a piece once saying that Trump supporters are people too.
Exactly.
And I actually I have a couple of friends at home who are Trump voters. And so, and it's important for me to talk to them to realize that,
Can I just finish going back to what you said before about Europe, China, and America? There is a sort of overriding thought for me on this, which is Trump's probably not going to be there forever, okay? And when he goes, somebody else will be there. If that somebody else is, let's just say for simplicity's sake, a Democrat, and somebody who's a little bit more global and conciliatory in their approach, it could be an absolute surge for democracy. It really could be. Now that we've seen what democracy can look like when you've got somebody like Trump at the head of it in the United States, and Europe digging their heels in and saying, no, we're not going to bend the knee. We're not going to do it. A time when somebody who's truly democratic coming back to the presidency, the opportunity to really create the surge from that, I think is really big. Now, I might be, as I say in Spanish, sinning by optimism, but I really can foresee a time in the next few years where NATO really surges up again, and democracy really surges up again, international institutions do, because we've seen what happens when that's not the case. And that might be a blessing in disguise.
Thank you very much for your intervention. We can now continue with the third section.
You can call me Alex. I'm a third-year Bachelor of Law student here at IE University. I'm Ukrainian. And apart from being a law student, I'm also the president of Public Speaking Club, which is co-organizing this activity, and a CIVICA ambassador. So it's tremendously important to have you here. Thank you for coming. I would like to change the topic of the conversation to an education part of it. We talked a lot about how misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda actually influence day-to-day life, politics, AI, tech development. However, here at IE University, we're doing everything possible in order to foster education, in order to teach students how to discern what is right and what is wrong. However, not everybody knows how to do that. And my question is critical thinking enough? Is media literacy enough? What are we missing? Why is such a large chunk of the population so easily believing into some easily made up stories. What should we do in educational spheres for our younger generation in order to prevent this from happening in the future?
Well, I would definitely start by just, I want to say that there's what we call the third-party phenomenon. Is that we tend to think that all these other stupid people are believing this stuff, which isn't always necessarily true. People aren't so stupid. Even though I do tend to sometimes think that, I can be cynical about that. But the truth is, we often think, oh, all these people believe it. I think it's important to realize again that it's about belonging and about feeling part of a group, maybe a little smug about your group, and you're sharing things that might not be true. And it's not that you necessarily are being duped by it, but you like it and it fits with your narrative and it fits with your group, and so you share it. I think there's that. But I also sometimes, as a professor, it's challenging. This year was the first year I mean, not supposed to have phones in the classroom yet. The phones are in, and I eliminated laptops. Yet, when students are working in groups and I walk around, they're usually going to AI for everything instead of doing searches. And often, I had even master's students working on setting up arguments. I had them doing a series on free speech in the US. We did a series on that, and having them do different debates. And I found them using AI to come up with their debate points. And I was like, no, the whole point of debating is it forces you to think critically. And so I think we're in a really, really challenging time. And IE has been a very tech-forward university. Yet I think we also have to recognize, I don't know, and learn. I think I have more to learn than pronounce.
I think that we should also start thinking about this whole process not as an isolated development, but we see more or less a crisis of the traditional media itself, of how journalism as a profession develops in total. So, for example, through all of these attempts of media capture, through ownership, through regulations, through advertisement, through shipping journalists to a very nice destination, and so on, we really see a loss of trust in the audience, which makes people accepting of alternative sources. So we should really think about what kind of future we foresee for the media systems as they are. And what is highly connected to this matter is the consumption patterns. So this is also where we as individuals could actually change something, instead of watching a TikTok video or asking ChatGPT for the latest information, we could actually do the painful way, and we could read the news on the online website. I don't know how many people here have subscriptions of their favorite newspapers. You have one for The Economist and for the Financial Times, but maybe you could also think about subscribing to one of your favorite outlets, as it will probably not cost more than your Netflix account. So this is what we can do maybe in an educational system or educational space, that we try to increase the sensitivity for all of these topics. But then also from a perspective of a policymaker, we might want to think about how we can professionalize journalism again, how we really can start thinking about how we see the occupation as a journalist in the future. Because as we've heard today, journalists, the occupation of a journalist becomes more and more important, as they will be the one in the future distinguishing between what is true and what is fake. I think more and more of their daily work will be deciding, finding the sources, finding different sources, while less and less will be actually the writing, because that can be done otherwise. And also, like, at the moment, basically everybody can call himself or herself a journalist. This wouldn't be the case for teachers. You cannot just call yourself a teacher and then teach. You cannot call yourself a professor and then create some research or teach some students. You cannot call yourself a pharmacist and then start selling, medication to other people. You cannot call yourself a doctor and practitioner. So we restrict all of these occupations that are very vivid for our everyday life, but the people who actually create the information that we need for our basic political decision, we don't restrict any of that, because, today everybody can call themselves a journalist. So this is maybe also a way to think about it, how to approach this problem and what we could solve in the future, so that we are not exposed to this kind of disinformation, the amount of disinformation we're currently doing.
Yeah, in education, I think our role has changed significantly in the past probably 20 years. The feeling I have is that people are looking for real life cases of criteria. They're exposed to many different sources of information. It's a complete bombardment, right? And you look for help and you get more information, and you look for criteria and you get more information, and you just get information overload. And we want to link ourselves to people. We do. We're social beings, right? We want to belong, to use your word, Alana. We want to belong to groups and relationships. So what I've noticed, and I'm not trying to exaggerate my importance unnecessarily, but what I have noticed is that people actually look to you to get some kind of reference. Not necessarily a good one, but just to get a reference, right? You're there as a teacher and you're talking with some expertise on some matter, and they will ask you questions about things that have got nothing to do with the class. They'll ask you what you think about Andrew Tate, as I was saying, in the break. And they're genuinely interested in knowing what you think about Andrew Tate. And we, in one particular class, we actually put on his podcast. I said, well, let's have a listen to him then. I do believe in, as much as possible, free speech, and I do believe that we should give everybody the chance to have a voice. And if they're talking absolute nonsense, then we should be able to detect that, right? Because we're educated people from lots of different backgrounds. And after about 10 minutes, I stopped it and I said, can we just, let our bodies calm down a little bit and analyse what's going on? And what the boys in the class were incapable of doing was identifying the emotional reactions that he was causing in them. Fascinating. They couldn't do it. Huh. They just, I said, come on, can we put the name on the emotions that this guy makes you feel? I mean, what he's saying is, no, it's not that. I'm not asking about a message. What's happening inside you when you listen to him? Weren't able to do it. I said, okay, well, I'm a bit older than you guys, okay? So I've been around the mill a bit, and I've been through lots of more extreme, probably not necessarily, but probably extreme emotional circumstances. Maybe I'm a bit more self-aware, but I can tell you what he creates in me. He creates a sense of fear, right? That's what he does. He creates a sense of fear in me, and he creates a sense of fear in women. And status.
Terror.
Yeah, and autonomy. He makes me feel afraid, right? People are after me. People are after my identity. People are after my soul, right? This is what the guy is making me feel. Now, thank goodness, I am sorry to the online viewers. I'm a grown-ass man, right? So I can sort of feel that happening and say, I'm sorry, Mr. Tate. Yeah. It doesn't wash with me. But I know it washes with a lot of young people. And my son, who I was talking to about it, was saying, Dad, this washes with a lot of young men. It really does. And I said, so we need to talk to the emotion, right? We need to say it creates a sense of fear. And courage is not about negating fear. Courage is about facing fear and saying, right, okay, there's a big, strong, angry animal in front of me that wants to eat me. So what's my response? That's the courageous one, okay? So the courageous response is to say, okay, I get this. It makes me feel afraid. I now need to think, should I be afraid? Is it really that much of a threat? And so on and so forth. So I make it very personal now, the answer to your question. I think as a teacher, I'm going to have a certain amount of influence with a certain amount of people, and I need to use that as much as I possibly can to give people the tools to be able to cope with what's coming at them in the world. And specifically in this case of young men, it's the ability to put names on the emotions that they're feeling.
You know, and that what you're talking about, that the fear, the belonging, all that. So there's a book I finished over the break. I highly recommend Peter Pomerantsev if you're at all interested in propaganda. He wrote a book called Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, about his experiences. He was Russian, British, is still younger than me, so he's around. He's producing his latest book is How to Win an Information War. And he really delves into, so he's delving into, in this case, a German British man who went to the UK and during World War II was really producing a lot of the important black propaganda out of the UK, which meaning the propaganda that looks like it's totally something else. These were radio shows that were happening in Germany, that happened in German, and the average person had no idea where it was coming from. And then other shows where people kind of did, but still liked what they were saying. It's really, really interesting. But you know, a lot of what he says over and over again is that this kind of propaganda is aimed at making you feel part of something and making you feel part of an in-group, and that your in-group is threatened, and you need to feel fearful and you need to fight against him. And this is the same kind of thing we've seen with Trump. And it's really interesting because it had me then this morning, I was remembering, and I had AI help me remember it better, was an article I read by Sherry Berman years ago about the Weimar Republic. And so what I was thinking at the end of this book was, as an activist, and he was saying as well, it's this, the answer to this isn't isolating these people more, right? It's having the conversations. It's about trying to find belonging. And as someone who comes from the world of organizing and activism, right, I see it more as civic action, civic structure, civic organization. And what was really interesting about Berman's study of the Weimar Republic was there was a vibrant civic community going on, but that people were really siloed into their different groups, and so that they weren't doing the cross-talking enough. And so when Hitler came along, he was able to divide and conquer and spread fear. And it was to me, is a really fascinating study that we need. She was saying, basically the conclusion was like, vibrant civic community without strong institutions equals danger. Right? And we're living in a world where in the last decades we see a lot more cynicism about institutions, cynicism particularly about the media. And so these kind of situations leave us ripe for propaganda and for it to work on us. And so it's complex and deep but fascinating stuff, but we've got to find ways. I think finding ways of creating more belonging amongst people and different types of people. And so I believe like groups like this, like your public speaking club, I think these types of things amongst students are really important in bringing students from different majors together. Not always, I think sometimes we see our students are all in the same class, or certain nationalities all hang together. And it's really about bringing different types of people together and always being accepting, listening to the other side. But these are hard to do.
Absolutely. I think all of you raised such an important point, that fear actually is a very interesting tool and powerful in order to break even those people who are prepared, who have a shield, who are resilient. And I have a very small example to show to all online viewers. We are taping this recording the day before election in Hungary. And one of my friends is Hungarian. We know each other for a long period of time. But now I think all of you know that the political situation is divided. So one of the candidates raised an important point that in case the election goes one way or another, then my country, Ukraine, is going to invade Hungary. And my friend fully seriously comes to me and asks, is it going to happen? Tell me, like there is an army already waiting like on the border of Hungary. And I was happy to share information and to be fully transparent, come up with all of the sources that I could find reliably to prove that it is not going to happen, that we are not even thinking of this, and this is a pure propaganda and disinformation. But what actually makes this example important is that what if there wasn't this international collaboration? What if there wasn't a Ukrainian next to that person? Then they would believe that this is true, or at least they will continue believing that this is partially true. And this is very frightening to me. However, I would like to ask a question. What can make us resilient to this? Because even students at IE University sometimes doubting themselves about the information, the credibility of it, the sources. How can we increase this really resilience of all people who consume information on a daily basis now?
Your conversation with your friend is a great example of it, right? It's again like talking to people and asking the questions instead of being like, oh wow, this Ukrainian, I better not talk to him because you know they want to invade. It's like such a strange story. It's a fascinating one actually, right? But I think it comes down to that, and then also, I mean, I think yeah, there are skills we can teach and kind of thinking like a journalist or a researcher, right? When we're doing our research for anything important, I mean, of course, any research is going to be either subject to a panel or a peer review. You better back it the hell up, right? And so that's the thing. I've got several thesis students right now, and I'm like, when in doubt, put the citation in. Oversight, right? And so those types of things, yeah, and stop cheating your own education by letting AI do your thinking for you. But I think these are really challenging times to be a student and to be a teacher.
I've noticed that as my experience as a teacher there's a couple of really interesting interactions I've noticed. The first one is when you get someone who's not popular in the class. So you've got your groups, okay? You've got your cliques in the class. Yeah. And you maybe have 4 or 5 of them, and you've got a few people who aren't in the clique. When somebody asks a question or does something a bit strange and they're not in the clique, get massive attention from the cliques. They want to know if I'm on their side or the side of the non-cliquey people. And I think it's happening at a really sub-level, isn't it? They want to see who am I identifying with? Who's my cool group in the class? It's us, isn't it, Professor Mike? We're the cool group. And there's no, Mike. We're the cool group, aren't we? We are. And you're not going to pay attention to that person because they're not in our cool group. And I can notice the class goes silent when that happens. You know, because I'm a musician and because I perform, I sort of have to be a little bit attentive to how people are receiving me, right? If it's going really badly, I need to pick up on it and change. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, it's gone quiet. Everybody's looking at me. What's going on? And it's that. They're seeing who I'm identifying with.
It says a lot that you notice when suddenly they go quiet and they're all looking at you. Right?
Most of the time they're not.
Yeah, most of the time it's
Are we overheating again, Alex?
I want just to give an advice to the team behind the scenes. You can use the phone as well to record the video in case it goes wrong. No, just
I asked them to turn up the
sometimes,
air conditioning.
yeah. But thank you very much indeed. And I want to raise a very important point as well. We are here thanks to the CIVICA. And CIVICA provides this platform for inter-university, international exchange of information, collaboration in both research, in academic exchange for students, and also such events like these and initiatives like Voices for CIVICA. In your opinion, how can CIVICA contribute more into combating disinformation and resisting to propaganda? How can we actually foster education of students and all of the staff members of all universities in order to improve overall European resilience to disinformation?
Yeah, if I may start on this one. So Personally, I'm currently offering a course that is called Media, Politics and Democratic Resilience, and I think this is a good way to start. I'm offering at CIVICA, where I'm currently doing my research stay, which is also part of the CIVICA network. I will also teach the same course at Goethe University in Frankfurt and during the summer term. So I think there is the potential to bring together students that are intrigued by these topics and who really want to share their opinion, not just in a national setting, but also international ones. And given that we've had all different experiences, we've all grown up in different spatial settings and different temporal settings, and also experiencing different media systems, we kind of can share our opinion and say, okay, this works well in my country, and think about, okay, maybe this could also work in my country. Oh no, we have this thing, maybe it wouldn't exist. So just getting in a conversation, having maybe also some shared courses through like online sessions and so on and so forth. I think this is a very, very useful attempt. Today on this panel we had discussants with 4 different backgrounds: AI, political science, media, journalism, political communication, economics. And we had this very fruitful discussion because of our diverse context, because this is not a simply solved issue. So therefore, the more angles we get and the more people we are having this conversation, the easier it is to actually come into the discussion and maybe solve some parts of it in the future.
And also different nationalities.
Yeah,
it also contributes to the richness.
Yeah, I did ask students from different countries when the attack on Iran began and the issue with Sanchez and the military bases came up, what their opinion was. And I was surprised at the result, because basically all of the people from the Middle Eastern, let's say Arabic countries, absolutely supported him. Absolutely supported him. They thought it was great, and that was something I didn't expect. I only knew by asking, and I was only able to ask because they were in front of me. That's a unique and privileged situation to be in, to have educated people from different countries all together in the same forum. And this is now the second time I've got to sit down at a CIVICA forum with panel members and the audience. And although it's a big responsibility of mine to yap and to talk, it's also a big learning thing for me to listen. And I grow from it. Hopefully you guys grow from it. And we do grow from getting testimony from people who are in different circumstances from ourselves.
Yeah, I would say I can't stress that enough as well. I mean, we have to be talking to other people. And one of the things that frustrates me, and this is one of the things I was pushing back on in Dakhla, was how hard it is for education to do all that. And just now, one of the things that frustrates me is often is the people who aren't going to university, and they're the ones who vote less. But maybe that's one of the things we need to do as well, is find ways to bring in young people who aren't going to school. How can we be having conversations with people who are from totally different situations and walks of life? Because it's really easy to organize universities, really easy to get to them. Sometimes my students are doing projects where they need to test young people. I'm like, you're not getting all young people by just asking people at IE. That's a very, very skewed sample.
Yeah.
And so how can we push out of that bubble? We often talk about the IE bubble, right? How can we push out of our bubbles and get to have these conversations with other people? It's a huge challenge, but I'm sure we'll put our heads together, we can come up with some really creative solutions.
No, absolutely. And before moving on to the last question from my part, I would like to say a warning to all of the students that in case you have a question, mull over it and prepare it, because next part is Q&A. So my last question, something that interests all of us, really. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future? Let's say that in next 10 years, right, in 2036, do you believe that humanity, young generation, and students in general are going to be more resilient to disinformation and propaganda, or you are leaning towards a worse situation in 10 years?
I got out of the prediction game in 2016. Ever since then, I say I do not have a crystal ball. I'm sort of, I prefer the word hope to optimism, but being a California girl, that's kind of my nature.
Mike, are you hopeful?
Oh, I'm definitely hopeful. Am I optimistic? I think probably yes. I'm optimistic, yes. I'm optimistic because I do believe that Europe has really hit the sweet spot for this. I do. It's actually very, very wealthy as a sort of political organisation. It's got a lot of people and a lot of wealth. Okay, it's democratically stable. Tomorrow we'll find out a little bit more about that, but it's democratically stable, and it's as a consumer base, it's got a lot of wealth, right? It's important to the rest of the world that Europe buys things, so we do have quite a lot of leverage as a result of that. AI is upending everything. It's changing an awful lot of stuff, but there are some things that I think, for example, China's resurgence as a strong power, I actually believe to be a very positive thing, all right? Because if I apply humanitarian criteria to it, there are, I think, approximately 700 million people who came out of poverty due to China's incorporation into the world economy. That can only be a good thing, right? I mean, I know America laments its loss of power and influence, but that's a good thing. I think America is about to change direction, because I don't think the Trump worldview is in the long term working for America. So I do think that is going to come realign, and we're going to get a period of more prosperity and alignment. That's my optimistic view.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, my view is also rather optimistic, but I would say it's more rooted on the individual base. So when I was talking with students about all of these issues, they responded that they're using social media less because it gets the space of just AI slope about things that are vaguely interested. They can feel that they're losing their time on it, that their mental health is deteriorating. So on the other hand, we have this increases in trust levels to traditional media, students seeing, oh, it's actually necessary that I do the research myself, not use the AI or the LLMs all the time. So yeah, and speaking of LLMs, you also see the development that they're increasingly trained on data generated by the LLMs themselves or other LLMs, which means that that the quality also deteriorates. Therefore, yeah, we have this regulatory resilience that is happening in the EU. There are a lot of beacon of hopes, but I think we as individuals can really make the difference, and the way I see it progressing is a rather optimistic one, yeah.
Thank you very much to all of you, really. And now let's turn to questions from the audience. Dear students, if you have something left after the break or which you haven't asked yet, please feel free. This is the moment. Yes, please introduce yourself and state the question.
So my name is Anastasia. I come from Warsaw School of Economics. And my question is, so how do you actually keep up with all the world news and events in such a great amount of disinformation and biased news as people who have so much responsibilities, work and like events, and so little time for yourself?
Thanks. I like to ask my students.
Should we repeat the question for the audience, because they probably didn't hear it?
Yes, that's actually a very interesting point. Thank you very much for reminding me. So, Anastasia from SGH, right? The question is about how you're keeping up with consuming such a huge load of news daily, and how do you keep discerning what is true or not on such a huge basis every day?
Yeah, I like asking my students what their news routines are. One of my favorite stories was some American students I had for a special course here on international media, and they all said they got their news off social media. And that was at a time, you guys might not remember this story anymore, but there was a Chinese spy balloon flying over the US, right? This was the biggest piece of news, even here in Spain, huge news. And so I said, okay, we're gonna do our media analysis on this. And they were like, what? None of them, 15 students, none of them had heard of that story. So something was failing in their news routines. My news routine, in fact, I wrote about it because I said, well, I think it's interesting for us to share. My news routine is that I actually, what I like to do is I have a lot of news apps on my phone, and I have all of the notifications. And so at any given time, I'm seeing different notifications about the same piece of news. So I like seeing how they're treating it differently. I do read the New York Times pretty religiously because I have to. But I also bounce between that and maybe The Guardian, FT when I can, Spanish newspapers, particularly El País and El Español sometimes. I should give them a plug. But, and some Spanish media and some American media and a lot of podcasts. There's some really good ones. So Foreign Affairs is another one I read a lot of and assign a lot from Foreign Affairs. It's excellent. It's kind of partway between an academic article and a journalistic article. And they have a really good podcast, weekly interview that's always very topical and very important. And Ezra Klein's podcast is another one I really, really like. And of course, the New York Times, The Daily, is always very good and very topical. So there's like, I do a mishmash of podcasts. And The Atlantic is another one of my favorites. And a lot of these papers now as well, when you've got the apps, you can listen to them. So I do a lot of listening to news and podcasts on my commutes, which helps me get through more news. And so that's kind of my routine. But I find that at any given time, I'm on top of stuff because I am kind of flipping through the notifications as I go, and that often then I'll have to go in on the things that I'm more interested in. But it works for me. I don't rely on social media, not one bit for news. It's just not my routine at all. I don't do it.
Patrick, Mike,
Yeah.
would you like to add something?
For me, it's actually pretty similar, even though not to the same extent. So I don't rely on social media for any kind of news. I barely use social media. The only social media I have is like LinkedIn, but this is also just for connections. I can read maybe 2 posts and then I get a headache, so I just turn it off. What I actually do use is on one hand Financial Times, the daily update that I receive every morning. Then I see some headlines. If something interests me, I do further research. I really frequently check the German public service media as well. Of course, can be a bit biased and can be maybe a bit too centrist or too state supporting. Therefore, I also use foreign media sources, BBC. I really love the Austrian newspaper, Der Standard. It's a great newspaper. So having these mix from different countries, private, public, with maybe also some notes or on the political bias, and always respecting that. I think that's a healthy mix. And we should also keep in mind that sometimes you don't need to keep up with everything. There's so much happening in the world, and you can't keep up with everything. If something important happens, you will probably know about it, and always, if people read about it, they're always happy to share what they've read. Don't stress out if you have missed a news or anything. It's just humane. We all have other things going on in our life. Yeah, we can also sometimes, it's also good for our mental health to sometimes take a break from what's going on outside. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a, here's the next question. I had a, just to finish on this one, I had a interesting debate in New Year's Eve with my familia politica, my in-laws, because my brother-in-law is American, and I was saying we just get far too much news about America here in Spain. We really do. I mean, it's, you know,
Keeps me in business.
well, you know, every cloud's got a silver lining, right? And I said, I don't think it's that relevant. I just don't. I mean, I don't think it's relevant that Trump had an argument with somebody.
No, yeah.
And it's just, you know, and I walked out of my house and looked around and thought, it's exactly the same as before Trump had an argument with somebody. Everything is exactly the same. Why is this relevant to me? And after that, and a very large disagreement on the part of my brother-in-law, who felt it was the other way around, I came to realise that even the press that I have a lot of faith in, which is typically the FT and The Economist, as I've mentioned more than once, I do look at the BBC and I do look at El País. I like to watch Onion News as well. Some of you may know Onion News. It's a satirical outlet that makes fun of traditional outlets by inventing really stupid stories and pretending to be really serious. It helps you sort of see through some of the veneer of traditional outlets. But I do follow a couple of others, individuals typically, Michael Wolff, people like that. You know Michael Wolff?
Oh, yeah.
Follow him. And on the health thing, a doctor who in America who debunks the Maha movement. Yeah, I follow her. And Professor Galloway, who's a American billionaire who gave up because he just hated everything about it, became a professor and now lives in Canada.
UCLM?
Yeah, I mean, you know, just different sources really to get things. And Fox News. Now that is not comfortable for me. I don't enjoy reading Fox News, but I do feel it's necessary. I really do, because I don't feel there's anything wrong with right wing. Okay, I might disagree with some of the people in the room over this, but I don't think right wing politics is bad. It's no worse or better than left wing politics. It's just a different kind of politics. But some of the extreme stuff, yes, of course. But as somebody pointed out, you never really hear much about far left politics, do you? You hear a lot about far right politics, but you don't really read or hear about as much far left politics, unless it's people saying lunatic communists or lunatic socialists or whatever. And it's interesting.
Bernie Bros.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to think. So is it being doctored? This, you know, is it being doctored? Am I being sort of lefty influenced by reading about all these scary ultra right wing people, but never reading about anything about scary ultra left wing people? Maybe I am being duped by this. But my hope is that by getting a bit of a mix, I get somewhere towards it. And the second hope is, you know, a lot of it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's take some more questions from the audience. Yes, please, could you introduce yourself quickly?
I'm Emily from Poland, representing CU. You said you're hopeful about future, and I would like to get back to the topic of AI and disinformation. Do you think that the next generations are going to be doomed, or will the influence of AI create a generation of people not being able to differentiate true information from the wrong one? Or will they become more resilient and question news and information they see online?
So for our online viewers, the question is about AI and the impact on the perception of the news, and is our generation, does our generation have a chance in order to identify all of the disinformation and not basically destroy itself?
I think I need to split AI into two parts. I need to split AI into our search for intelligence as individuals. So instead of going to Google and searching or looking it up in a book, we go into AI and we ask an LLM like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini to give us an answer, because that's one of them. So that's like the outsourcing of our thinking and research process. And I think so far what I've read and experienced is that that has led to people who aren't very good appearing a lot better, and people who are very good dumbing down their ability. Okay, very good students. I had a very interesting debate with one recently who gave me an AI-produced summary of what she thought, and I said to her, "You're a grade A student, okay? You're in the top few people. Don't please use AI to give me what you think about it, because that's an AI-produced output." Yeah. "No, Mike," I said, "and don't ever, ever deny something when I've caught you with your hand in the pot, okay? You know it's AI, and so do I. It is an AI-produced thing, and the thing that annoys me is not that you used AI, it's that you're better than that. And you're deceiving yourself by just allowing the machine to do it for you." I used it to correct my English.
Yeah, even that, no.
Yeah, and I say, okay, thank you. Please don't go anywhere near an AI system and rewrite your conclusions so that it's your words. She said, "Well, how do you know it's AI?" I said, "Because it sounds like AI. You don't talk like that. You don't. You talk in a much more structured and much more intellectually valid way." Okay. So I swear to you that she went away and said, "In a more structured and intellectually rewrite the following paragraph," you know? And I really raked her over the coals for it. And I said, "Now you're going to see, for one of the first times in the history of mankind, Mike getting a little bit angry, right? I don't get angry, but I'm going to get angry here because it's you're letting down, not me, right? Now, switch the effing computer off and write it in your hand, right? Just write it, because I want to know what you think." "I've been really short of time." Okay, that's the true answer. "I've been really short of time. Just write it out in your own words." And she wrote it out, and the English was bad, and it wasn't quite as coherent as the AI one, but it was her. So on the LLM thing, that's what I think is going to happen. But the other part of AI, which is the conditioning what we receive based on patterns, based on reinforcing our prejudices, I think that's going to get worse. Personally, I think that's going to get worse. I don't think that's going to get better.
Well, and that's why I think a lot of us, at IE, a lot of us have been switching back to paper exams. And students are like, "But we're supposed to be paperless." And we're like, "Yeah," and that hasn't gone so well. So really, and I saw it with a class, a communications group I had last semester. I thought, wow, this one written assignment, they were all perfectly written. And I was suspected they were all AI written, but I couldn't quite prove it. And so I kind of let it go. And then when I saw their essays on the written exam, I was like, yeah, these are real. I know what essays by non-native speakers of English, for the most part, look like. I've been grading them for 17 years. So we know what it looks like, and it's okay, because you're not a native speaker, you know? It's okay. But I think all of us now are really craving, when I see a real essay, when I can tell it's really written by them, I'm like, yes, you know, so.
Absolutely. I know we have another question from a student here. Could you please introduce yourself quickly and ask your question?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having the time here to connect with us and share your experiences and insights. My name is Angel Martinez. I'm from Honduras. I'm studying a master's in international development here at IE. So I have a question. I would say like two questions, like mixed in one. From a governance perspective, do you think that current regulatory approaches to social media are fundamentally reactive rather than preventive? I honestly think they're reactive, but I would like to know your insights on it. And considering that government attempts to regulate information in a way to rebuild the eroded trust that can be perceived as a biased and non-transparent attempt to reshape thought processes, what would you consider as a realistic governance tool to strengthen state capacity, transparency, accountability, and legitimacy?
I think most of what governments are doing is reactive. They're incredibly behind the curve. You guys are more like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it was a long time ago now, maybe 10 years ago, there was a famous, no, maybe not that, 5 years ago in the US Congress, and they had like Mark Zuckerberg and God knows who else in, and you had people like Dianne Feinstein, who was already like 90 at that point, you know, stumbling through really dumb questions. And so, yeah, that happens. Governments are always going to be governments are rarely, never ahead of the game, because you're only creating laws when usually there's problems. And so that governments are always at a bit of a disadvantage that way, and they need to get better experts in. But it's tough going, you know.
Yeah,
Go
if
for
I
it.
may add on it, there is this very interesting blog post by Damian Tambini, LSE professor in the media department there, and he describes exactly what you're saying. Yes, of course, they are reactive, all the regulations that we have. He was referring to European Media Freedom Act at that time, but this is in the nature of things, right? We prohibit certain possibilities for media capture, and then those, let's say, vicious actors, liberal actors, find new ways to capture the media, to influence the public sphere, and then we have to react again and see, like, given the new technology that has developed in the meantime, given the new strategies, given the new political realities, what we can do again. So law, as you all know, is not like one thing that we once set up and that never gets changed, but since our society changed, since our material basis changes over time, also the law has to change with it. To the second question, I think what you've pointed out is one of the several points you've pointed out, transparency. Like just making AI content or LLM generated content transparent would, I would say, be already a first step in the right direction, just to let people know, okay, this news article I'm reading, this video I'm watching, this picture I'm seeing needs to be transparently classified as something that is AI generated and human generated, could be a first step into the right direction. But also for the other issues that you have pointed out, there are probably a lot of solutions, but I think we all have, we are all limited in our capabilities, and to just think about what possible solutions could be in that case. Yeah, maybe you want to add.
How are we doing for time? Are we?
We are finishing up.
Yeah, finishing up.
Yeah, we're
Okay. No, I've nothing else to say about that on top of what's already been said.
Could I still ask you questions actually?
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but feel free to ask the question right after the panel. Thank you. Well, first of all, I'm asking you all to give a huge round of applause to our amazing speakers who sat down here for several hours now. And to conclude, we would like to say a huge thank you to, first of all, CIVICA for organizing this amazing project of Voices of CIVICA, to all of the people who worked behind the scenes before the event, during the event, and even right now as I'm speaking. It was a pleasure having you all here at IE University. Thank you to all of the guests from other universities, SGH and SNSPC, and of course Central European University, for coming to us. It was amazing having you here. We hope to have a very fruitful collaboration in the future, and most of all, take care. Thank you very much.
Welcome to CIVICA, the European University of Social Sciences.